Hi everyone, my name's Richard. I am the CEO of Released. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video. And today we're going to focus on measurement. Before we do that, it goes without saying we're very proud to be working with PR Moment on this PR League competition and wish you all the very best of luck. Now, for context, for over a decade, we've been helping PR teams all around the world streamline their reporting process, showcase their results in the most visual and professional way possible, and crucially, prove their ROI. So in this video, we're actually going to do two things. We're firstly going to take a step back and look at broad measurement best practices, and then we're going to dive into an example report to show those practices in action. So let's get started. Now, our recommendation when thinking about proving impact is to mirror the journey that you want to take your audience on. Now, whilst every journey will be unique, there are usually distinct stages in that process, and we've illustrated some of those here. Now, these are relevant whether you're working on a B2B campaign or B2C. Now, what we're seeing here is that we need to take an audience that has no awareness of what you're doing to the point where there's a meaningful outcome. Now, that might be a purchase, it might be a vote, or it may just be that you're front of mind when they're ready to make a decision. So let's explore these typical steps. First of all, we need to raise awareness. Obviously, without awareness of what you're doing, no further action can take place. And then once they're aware, they need to have a good understanding of what it is you're promoting. Once they understand it, ideally, we want to create some resonance with them so they form an opinion or some kind of emotional reaction. And once we've done that, ideally, we would make ourselves as memorable as possible so that in 6 days, weeks, 6 months' time, we're front of mind. So the problem with most PR measurement is that we're stuck with basic metrics like reach or coverage views. And whilst they're helpful in illustrating we've raised brand visibility, as you can see, they don't really illustrate the full impact that good PR can make. So my recommendation for you when thinking about best practices, map out the journey that you want to take your audience on and brainstorm some of the analysis that you can do to provide evidence that you've successfully executed each stage of that process. Next, we're going to explore a report that demonstrates how you can put this into practice. Now, this report is actually based on a real campaign, a real event that happened in 2025 called IAA Mobility, which celebrates innovation and leadership in the mobility space. Now, just to be clear, we created this report ourselves. It's based on publicly available information on the web, and it's purely done to illustrate measurement best practice. So let's explore this example report together. Now, to create this report, we simply added branding and dragged and dropped these different elements in place. And as you can see here, there's an overview of the campaign and some really important KPIs, which I'm actually going to come back to at the end. Next, we have some of the campaign highlights, including a video. We've got a press release, a map, some key imagery from the event, and some of the feedback. Now, links to the media coverage and the social media posts were simply gained from Google Alerts. We pasted it into the system and it produced these visual snapshots, which also includes some of those basic metrics I talked about before, including the reach, domain authority, unique visitors, coverage level views, and social engagements of the coverage too. Similar with social posts, pasted in the links, fetched the interactive posts, and grabbed all of the available metrics. That covers the visualization of the coverage, but what we're going to move on to now is the good stuff around proper evaluation. Now, as you can see here, what we've done is we've mapped the different stages of the audience journey onto the different categories of measurement here in this report. So the first question is, what kind of metrics and analysis can we use to show that we've taken an audience from no visibility to a good level of brand awareness? Now, some of these metrics you'll be more than familiar with, such as coverage volume, reach, but more credible version of that is coverage views, which is more accurate. And also we can start visualizing things like coverage views, whether they came from the source website or as people search through their social feeds, activity over time, the spread of domain authority. For B2C campaigns, you'll tend to see more authoritative sites. For B2B, they'll be less authoritative. And also we can track things like mentions. Obviously, it's interesting to know whether your brand was mentioned a lot or a little, but particularly interesting when you compare it to other brands in a similar space. So here we can see that the event itself was actually mentioned less in the coverage than the brands that exhibited within it, such as BMW or Audi. Is that good or bad? Well, actually, the prominence analytic measures whether the first mention of the brand was in the headline, the top, the middle, or buried at the bottom. And as you can see, that our brand in this case, the event itself, was mentioned predominantly in the headline, whereas in fact those other brands, although mentioned more, were kind of buried within the coverage. So that indicates that we've got really good visibility for the event itself. And here we're introducing attention measurement. There are now studies online that help you estimate, for a given word count, for example, how many minutes of focused attention that your coverage is receiving. So here we're able to estimate attention earned, and in a metric that replaces AV with something much more modern and credible, attention cost equivalency, which essentially says, look, if you were to purchase the same amount of attention with digital ads, what would your ad budget need to be? Now, the beauty of earned media is that the budget is always zero in terms of media spend. Now, the next section is all about building understanding and proving that we've communicated the things that we set out to communicate through the media to our audience. And a couple of really good ways of doing this is key message analysis and also tracking the inclusions of any spokesperson quotes, because essentially they're like key messages in human form. Now, there's two ways of doing it. You can either do it manually. Actually, AI is scarily good at doing this. So we've put this in our product, but you don't necessarily need to do that. You can use any AI-based tool, feed in your key messages, add links to your coverage, and it will do a really good job of detecting them for you. Now, our special hint here is if you're taking the automated route, keep those key messages as simple as possible. So in this example, we've got IAA Mobility as the world's leading platform for the future of mobility. And the third one, it's driving conversation on sustainable transport. That makes it much easier for the AI to do a really good job. But again, here, it's all about having evidence that you have communicated to your audience. And through doing so, you've done everything you can to build a sense of understanding, which is crucial before we reach the next step. Now let's move on to the next phase, which is all about evidence that we have resonated with our audience. There's a number of ways you can infer this. Obviously, ideally you would have focus groups or surveys, but let's be honest, we don't have the budget or time for that usually with typical campaigns. So here we can look at things like, okay, if your coverage has landed on Facebook predominantly for consumer, how are people reacting to it in the feed? Here we can see it's all positive, but also some campaigns could show things like sadness or anger, which we've seen before. Sentiment analysis. So typically sentiment analysis is done on an article level. The problem with that, as I'm sure you've all seen, is that articles are negative, but you've managed to get your client featured positively. So again, AI is very, very good at understanding the context of the mention of your brand within an article. And that's what's happened here. You can see positively for the brand itself and for one of the exhibitors, and for another one, it's a bit more mixed. So accurate sentiment analysis is actually a very useful indicator of how the audience is likely to receive the brand. And then finally, perception analysis, which again looks at how the audience is likely to think about and perceive the brand based purely on the coverage that's been generated. So here we can see the event is being described as innovative, transformative, competitive, futuristic, and strategic, which is an AI-based analysis. So it gives you a bit more of an impartial flavour of how you're being positioned in the market. And you can do that again versus other brands too. And the final section here, which is arguably the most important, is providing evidence that the coverage has made a lasting impact with its audience. Now, to do this, we're introducing the brand recall score. And we've created a little formula that uses 3 ingredients to give you an indication of how memorable the brand is. And these are mentions. So obviously being mentioned 10 times in an article is generally more memorable than just once. Prominence, again, a mention in the headline is generally more impactful than being buried at the bottom. And sentiment, so a 10 out of 10 super duper positive score is generally going to make more of an emotional impact than a 2 or 3, something a bit more neutral. Now you can measure those 3 ingredients independently, create your own little formula and come up with your own brand recall score. And another easy win is to track links back to the source website as well, which makes a lasting impact in terms of SEO over time. Now we promise to come back to the top of this report because we need to talk about the gold standard of reporting, which is meaningful impacts. So have a real think about the result of your work. What do you want the meaningful outcome to be, and how can you track it and evidence that in the competition? So hopefully what we've shown here today is that by thinking about the journey you want to take your audience on, you can then brainstorm appropriate analytics that evidence each stage. And by doing that, you can come up with a really compelling case when it comes to proving the impact of your campaign. I hope that's been useful. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this. And I'm really looking forward to seeing your entries in this competition. Very best of luck to you all.